Welcome to the Consolidated Grant Training for the 21-23 biennium to provide grant management guidance to any agencies or staff new to the program. I'm Linda Howell. I'm a community liaison for the Public Transportation Division in South Central Washington. I'm also the Drug and Alcohol Compliance Lead for the east side of the state. One of my teammates will be keeping an eye on the chat panel, and I'll stop every now and then to answer questions. This training used to be a half day long, but we're shortening it because really a lot of the direction will be given by separate GMS trainings. And some of the slides were converted to handouts, and a lot of the information is simply at your fingertips within the guidebook. Before we even get to the agenda, I want to share what is new this biennium compared to last cycle. You've got one project per agreement now, rather than multiple projects of the same type on one agreement. GMS requires this. From now on, most tasks will be done through the GMS platform. We will not be emailing you a reimbursement form or QPR template. Policies and procedures are still being developed, but invoicing will be available as soon as the third week of August. If your contract has been fully executed with the training, you are good to go. With the message about signing up for the grants management webinar, which is this training, you received instructions for GMS invoice training on August 17th and 19th. Expect the GMS trainings to occur repeatedly in the first quarter, and a recorded version available on our website. Previously, we asked even state-only funded grantees to report their DBE activity. The way that GMS is set up, if you don't have federal funds, you only need to open the third-party contract information section, indicate no, and then the federal fund section, indicate no, and you're done. We are adding some flexibility to our site visit schedule. Depending on several factors, you may only get a formal compliance visit or virtual interview once in every 3 or 4 years. Virtual site visits is the new norm. In the past, we've had a rule that a grant-funded vehicle must provide 100 passenger trips or 100 service miles per week. And lately, we've done a lot of work on finding the origins of our requirements. And that one was just actually a division decision, so we have removed it. This training is really an overview of many of the topics that are covered much more thoroughly in the Consolidated Grant Management Guide, which is available on our website. There's a link in the handout. I recommend you create a bookmark for the link for the guide rather than download it, because it will actually change throughout the biennium as rules, policies, and procedures change. The new guide for 21-23 is not quite published yet. We'll send you a notice in September or October when it is. Use the 1921 version until then. I am going to start with the administrative topics today, and then I'll cover financial, and finally capital procurement and maintenance. The primary reason for training grantees and collecting data and doing site visits is to ensure your success at staying in compliance and to share your successes with the grant makers, and that's the state legislators and the Federal Transit Administration. The QPRs are now called status reports in GMS. All the tabs from the Excel workbook have been translated to the GMS interface. These forms will look different depending on the project type. This example is for operating and mobility management projects. The capital status report is a bit simpler, and of course planning projects don't require a quarterly report, just a summary of activity with the invoices. On screen here, you'll see the grant components for an operating project. After you click on status reports, you'll see the selection in the red box. You'll go through the narrative, the DBE form, and the additional details form, which includes things like expenses, trips, miles, and hours, and complaints. If you need to upload an attachment to go with your narrative, you use the attachments function. So if we dive into the DBE form, the DBE is a requirement of federal recipients only. It doesn't include rolling stock. You'll find that in a lot of places you have to first save the form in GMS before you get the option to edit the form. So click Save Form, and then in the first section, click Edit Form. And for Are you using a contractor, choose No and save the form. Then you'll see an Add Row button for the second section. If you only have state funds, select No, save the form, mark it as complete, and you're done. If you receive federal funds, you must fill out some of the DBE form. Even if you haven't found a DBE, you can use, we want to see your good faith efforts. You'll remember from your consolidated grant application that we asked you to estimate a percentage of project budget that will be paid to DBE firms. Many said 1% or even 0.5% if they had failed in prior biennia to find a DBE, and that's understandable, especially in remote rural areas where few opportunities for contracting with DBEs is available. The other deliverables mentioned here depend on funding source and agency type. The program specialist from our office who's responsible for gathering these reports will reach out with the appropriate forms and deadlines when the date's near. On the next slide, you'll see these plotted out chronologically. This graph is included in the handout. I recommend printing it out and posting it near your monitor. Even veteran grantees seem to have trouble getting the quarterlies in on time, so GMS will send you reminders as the date nears, and that should help. There are 4 types of site visits we do: administrative, financial, capital, and drug and alcohol. All have some elements in common, which is that we do them because DOT is charged with providing oversight in FTA stead when we pass through federal dollars. We also uphold the rules and requirements of the state and of our own division. Site visits are the way we start conversations and document our findings and your compliance with your contract and any other requirements. Site visit checklists are modeled after the questions we are asked during our state management review by FTA. We may not use the whole checklist and instead focus on the topics identified as deficient in the last biennium or a topic that everybody seems to be having trouble with. A site visit is a prearranged visit or virtual meeting to review policies and procedures and compliance with requirements. It is not an audit. About 1 month in advance, we will schedule a visit and share materials. We will let you know who at your agency needs to be present. The frequency of site visits is based on your agency's risk level, the amount of time since your last compliance visit, and other factors. After the visit and subsequent collection of documents, DOT sends a letter detailing what you need to send us or what you need to change in your operations. There's usually a 30 or 60-day period to respond. Once satisfactory, we issue a site visit closure letter and confirm that you are in good standing. The administrative site visit will consist of checking in administrative policies and verifying operating procedures, and we will check for labor posters. Financial and capital site visits are covered later in this presentation. All grantees must have these 5 policies, whether state or FTA funded, transit or nonprofit or tribe. A new ADA checklist is almost ready. In addition to descriptions of mobility devices, service animals, by the way, there's a chart in the handout about service animals, and paratransit procedures, your policy must say how it is advertised to the public and how you provide alternative formats of documents as an accommodation for people with disabilities such as vision impairment. Volunteer driver policy only applies to those agencies with a volunteer driver program. And job descriptions, we look at a few of those, and we're looking for the exempt, non-exempt FLSA status. We're in the process of updating all of our old policy templates to a more in-depth checklist format based on federal circulars and the RCW. Policies that were approved in prior biennia may need to be revised. Some of our grantees last biennium redid their Title VI and EEO plans based on these new checklists. If your agency awards contracts with a combined total of $250,000 a year, federal fiscal year in federal funding, excluding rolling stock, which is your vehicles, you must have a written DBE plan. DNA, the drug and alcohol plan, is only 5309, 5311, 5339. By the way, this list of federal required policies and the thresholds or categories that you have to be in for them to be required is in your handout. Equal employment opportunity is the practice required for everyone, but the plan is only for agencies that have 50 or more transit employees. Title VI, which is discrimination based on race, color, or national origin, the policy/plan includes public participation plan, an analysis of those who speak limited English in your service area, and a description of how to make a Title VI discrimination complaint with a complaint card for your customers. While a written Title VI plan is only required for federal recipients, the rules of Title VI apply to all. With any of these policies, your community liaison can help you develop one. With the ADA, people with disabilities must have equitable access and transportation opportunities as people who are not living with disabilities. That includes accessible vehicles, facilities, websites, or written materials. Stop announcements for fixed route must be made at transfer points with other routes, major intersections, and when requested by rider. Service animals are trained to perform a task for a person with disabilities. It does not need to have proof with a certificate or other documentation, and it does not have to be professionally trained. The owner can train the animal to provide a service. Comfort animals, even with a doctor's note, are not service animals, and it's up to the agency whether to allow those pets. With both ADA and Title VI, individuals must be able to read or hear the information to enable them to use the service. And that means reading or understanding the routes, fares and schedules, riding rules, and eligibility process. They must be made potentially available in alternate formats like large print. You don't have to have the large print versions just sitting around, but you have to have a plan how you can quickly convert your documents to large print if it's requested. And if you have a population with limited English proficiency amounting to 5% of your service area population or 1,000 individuals, vital public documents must be translated into the other language. Title VI prohibits discrimination based on race, color, or national origin if a program is federally funded. The equivalent state law prohibits discrimination based on race, creed, color, national origin, sex, marital status, or the presence of any sensory, mental, or physical disability, or the use of a trained service animal by a disabled person. Title VI requires federally funded grantees to provide a complaint process and include a Title VI statement on your publications and on your website. Finally, the DBE goals are federally mandated targets for transportation projects that use federal aid. The program helps level the playing field for business owners that are socially or economically disadvantaged. Your ability to contract with DBE businesses counts towards our agency DBE goal. When we do our site visit, we will check the posters in the workplace where employees gather. These posters are from the U.S. Department of Labor, Washington Labor and Industries, and Washington Employment Security Department. FDA just told us last week that they don't look for these in their audits. So if you're missing any of these, it will just be a recommendation action in a site visit follow-up letter rather than a deficiency. The posters are equal opportunity employment, polygraph protection, job safety and health, your rights as a worker, minimum wage state and federal notice, notice to employee if injury occurs, unemployment benefits, FMLA, USERRA, and if covered by Fair Labor Standards Act, you must provide a notice about health insurance marketplace. If you're missing any of these, the handout contains links for the agencies that make the posters available as a free PDF. The Fair Labor Standards Act also requires that you pay minimum wage and time and a half for work over 40 hours, or the equivalent in a pay period, for non-exempt employees. That FDA special warranty, 5333B, is only for 5311 and 5339 recipients. The federal code is related to filing a claim if a transit worker is either terminated or somehow disadvantaged by a grant-funded project. This paperwork includes a claim form and a few appendices that haven't been updated in many years, so don't be concerned if it looks like it was mimeographed. The FDA hasn't updated it in a long time. This collection of documents should be available in the same place where employees gather as your labor posters are posted. And this is requirements for federal funded agencies only. Charter service is a trip arranged by a third party for a negotiated price and closed to the public. You're prohibited from providing charter service so that transits don't compete with private companies offering charter service. Demand response within regular service area is not charter. Exceptions to the charter rules include special needs transportation, official government business, and when there's no private alternative, but reporting is still required with those exceptions. With exemptions, there is no reporting, and that's for emergency work, fare-free rides, and employee transportation. See the appendix in the guide for more examples. Once you provide charter, you must continue reporting to the charter registry. You can ask your community liaison when it's okay to stop reporting. And school bus service is prohibited for the same reason. We don't want to compete with private school bus transportation companies. School bus service is exclusively for students and picks up and drops off on school grounds. So that's not allowed, but tripper service is allowed. That service, that's an add buses to the regular route that travels near schools when the school opens and at the end of the school day. And the public has to be welcome on those buses. FDA sometimes grants exemptions so that you can provide school bus service. Pullman Transit got an exemption letter from FTA, but it took a very long time. We only require recipients of 5311 and 5339 to have a drug and alcohol program. Testing applies only to safety-sensitive positions. Safety-sensitive employees may mean more than just the drivers. Sometimes mechanics and dispatch might be included in that pool too. You may implement a drug and alcohol program even if you don't receive one of those two sources of federal funding, but there are restrictions on the use of DOT forms. So be sure to talk to one of our drug and alcohol experts before you create a non-required program. Soon we'll release a recorded training and guidebook for drug and alcohol program managers. The program must include a written policy, an education and training system program, identification of prohibited drug and alcohol use, procedures for the types of testing, and the consequences for violation, and a record-keeping provision. Contact me or Pam Smith, who's the Western Washington Drug and Alcohol Lead, if you need more information on the written policy or anything regarding the drug and alcohol requirements. DOT does require agencies with the drug and alcohol testing program to perform adequate oversight of the collection and reporting process. And the people who are doing the collection, the MP or the MRO, medical review officer, the substance abuse professional. This is a common finding in state and federal reviews. WISTA, WISTIP, and CTA Northwest all receive RTAP grants to provide training and support to rural providers. Another part of RTAP is the peer reviews. Funds may be available to cover the cost incurred by the rural agency for a peer review. Potential recommendations during the review could relate to safety and training, maintenance shop efficiency, revisions to the org chart or job descriptions. It's anything that happens at your agency might be the focus. The peer review can focus on the entire agency or just one element. A rural agency initiates the request, which includes a specific problem statement, for review by the Public Transportation Division and a group of their professional peers. Finally, the RTEP scholarship program is probably what everybody's most familiar with. Scholarships are provided to help cover registration and travel expenses for training courses, workshops, and conferences for rural transportation providers. Scholarship applications, criteria, and instructions may be found on the RTEP webpage, which is part of the public transportation page on the Washington State DOT website, or by contacting the state RTEP manager, Mariana Hannafeld. You should already know who your community liaison is, but here's a map. If you have a capital project, you may also be in contact with our capital program staff for technical assistance. This map is also included in your handout.